Chapter 96, Sam's Heart and Soul, and Sigh.
From the day that Susie was born until her 13th birthday, her father Samuel wrote innocent and exhilarating adventure stories for children. Toward the end of Sam's life, he wrote, "When Susie was 13, she secretly and of her own notion and out of love added another task to her labors, the writing of a biography of me." In this biography of her father, 13-year-old Susie tells the world, "We are a happy family. We consist of Papa, Mama, Jean, Clara, and me. It is Papa I am writing about, and I shall have no trouble in not knowing what to say about him, as he is a very striking character. He is a very good man, and a very funny one, and oh, so absent-minded. He does tell perfectly delightful stories. Clara and I used to sit on each arm of his chair and listen while he told us stories about the pictures on the wall." A few years later, while Sam was away from home on a trip, Susie died. In a letter to his best friend, Sam wrote, "I did know that Susie was part of us. I did not know that she could go away. I did not know that she could go away and take our lives with her, yet leave our dull bodies behind." In the years following the death of his daughter, Sam became a devoted atheist and died an angry old man. But we forgive Papa Sam his anger. You and I can easily erase it from memory because, unlike Sam, we never knew his daughter Susie. We remember Sam only for the stories that he told young Susie as she sat on the arm of his chair and stared at the pictures on the wall. We remember Sam not for Susie Clemens, but for Tom and Huck and Cousin Sid and Becky Thatcher. And perhaps that's the way it should be.
Don't part with your illusions. When they are gone, you may still exist, but you have ceased to live. Mark Twain. Chapter 97, Dark with Smoldering Eyes.
He was a 20-year-old Scot. She, a 36-year-old American with 2 children. They met when she was traveling alone in Paris. She divorced her husband to marry him. It was not the Scot's best moment. Mark Twain described him thusly: "He was most scantily furnished with flesh. His clothes seemed to fall into hollows as if they might be nothing inside but the frame for a sculptor's statue. His long face and lank hair and dark complexion and musing and melancholy expression seemed to fit these details justly and harmoniously, and the altogether of it seemed especially planned to gather the rays of your observation and focalize them upon his special distinction and commanding feature, his splendid eyes. They burned with a smoldering rich fire under the penthouse of his brows, and they made him beautiful." Hoping to win some small measure of acceptance from his new wife's children, the young Scot took them on holiday to his native Scotland. As if in judgment, the weather immediately turned cold and rainy, and they were forced to amuse themselves indoors. Seated by the drying fire, the young Scot watched in rapt attention as his 12-year-old stepson, Lloyd, drew, colored, and annotated the map of an imaginary place. Lloyd's map stimulated our young Scot's imagination, and on a chill September morning by the cheek of a brisk fire, I began to write a story based on Lloyd's map as an entertainment for the rest of the family. Do you remember meeting this man with the smoldering eyes, so admired by Mark Twain? For it was he that introduced you to young Jim Hawkins, Billy Bones, Captain Flint, and Long John Silver, and gave you a place called Treasure Island. We speak his name always in its fullness, because he gave us fully of all he had to give, Robert Louis Stevenson. After giving us his best, he parted, and left us with these few words: "That man is a success who has lived well, laughed often and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, who leaves the world better than he found it, whether by a perfect poem or by a rescued soul, who never lacked appreciation of the earth's beauty or failed to express it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best he had." Are you looking for the best in others? Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Every man is entitled to be valued by his best moment." What will be yours?
Chapter 98. Tom and his editors.
Asking a writer what he thinks about editors is like asking a lamppost what it feels about dogs. John Osborne.
Tom is steaming with outrage. He has poured heart and soul into the writing assignment he was given, and now the editing committee is picking his work apart, word by word, phrase by phrase. Ever been there? Seeing Tom's frustration, Ben says, "Tom, I once knew a hat maker who, needing a sign for his shop, drew a little sketch of a hat and wrote above it the words, 'John Thompson, hat maker, fashionable hats sold inside for ready money.' As he was taking his sketch to the sign maker, his wife asked, 'Who would sell a hat for anything but ready money?' Delete that part." And so he did. Then a friend said, "And no one cares who made the hats as long as they're good. You should also delete John Thompson, hat maker." And so he did, which left only his picture of a hat and the words, "Fashionable hats sold inside." John hadn't gone very far before someone looked at the sketch and chuckled. Who would sell unfashionable hats? So John removed the word fashionable. And then another said, "Who sells hats on the sidewalk? Of course they're sold inside." All you really need is the picture of a hat, and above it the word hats. Satisfied that he now had the perfect sign, John showed his sketch to just one more friend. Looking quizzically at it, the friend said, "You surely don't need the word hats above the picture, John. All that's needed is the picture itself." So when he finally arrived at the sign maker's shop, John Thompson had nothing to show him but his little drawing of a hat. Seeing it, the sign maker said, "This needs something more. Might I suggest that we add your name and occupation, John Thompson, hat maker, and perhaps beneath it the words, 'Fashionable hat sold inside for ready money.'" Having heard Ben's story, Tom decided not to abandon his writing assignment, and the rest is quite literally history. You will find the original story of the hatmaker's sign in the Congressional Archives among the papers of Thomas Jefferson, preceded by this notation, quote, "Dr. Franklin perceived that I was not insensitive to Congress' mutilation of my document, the Declaration of Independence, and tried to reassure me by whispering a parable." Alas, I fear that H.G. Wells was correct when he said, "No passion in the world is equal to the passion to alter someone else's draft." For if you should locate the original version of Benjamin Franklin's story of the hatmaker's sign in the Congressional Archives and compare it to my telling just now, you will find that, yes, God forgive me, I edited it. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, Ben.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kipling, but you just don't understand how to use the English language.
Publisher's letter to Rudyard Kipling, rejecting his Jungle Book, 1889.
A sheer dead pull from start to finish.
Book review of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, 1897, Century Magazine.
So this is a book of the season only.
New York Herald Tribune review of F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby, 1925.
It is impossible to sell animal stories in the USA.
Publisher's rejection of George Orwell's Animal Farm, 1945.
The girl doesn't, it seems to me, have a special perception or feeling which would lift the book above the curiosity level.
Publisher's rejection letter of Anne Frank's diary, 1952.
Chapter 99. Another great American success story.
Having arrived during the night, we were unprepared for the stunning beauty that awaited us in the morning. Rubbernecking like the tourists we obviously were, Penny and I were crossing the courtyard of a magnificent Spanish mission-turned hotel when we noticed him. We smiled and said, "Buenos dias." He smiled and said, "Hello." We asked if he knew how to get to the hotel restaurant. His name was Eduardo Prado. Your first impression of Eduardo is that he would make the perfect Latin James Bond. Your second impression is that he beams enough positive energy to be a Spanish Rick Dees. We fell into Traveler's conversation. He said that he was at the hotel to make arrangements for an upcoming event for FIFA, the World Soccer League. We told him that we were in town for a seminar. It was just then that he was joined by his wife, Anna, and the third impression hit both Penny and me like a tidal wave. JFK and Jackie in the years of Camelot. Over the next 3 days, we learned that Eduardo and Anna are exactly the same age as Penny and I, and their daughters are the same ages as our sons. We also learned that Eduardo's soccer gig is completely voluntary. Eduardo Prado is the classic self-made millionaire, a 2-time pauper, and a 3-time winner. Eduardo made his first fortune as a fisherman selling shark skin to Italian sports car makers. When a huge shipment of shark skin was hijacked into Mexico, Eduardo was ruined. He even had to pay for the trucks that were stolen. With no money and no prospects, Eduardo lay awake at night asking, "What great need can I fill?" He then made his second fortune by building thousands of small houses for the poor. But since Eduardo wasn't born into a wealthy family, he had no one to turn to when the bank politely informed him one day that he had no money. "What did you do with my $7 million?" asked Eduardo. "Exactly which $7 million do you mean?" replied the bank. "I'll sue," threatened Eduardo. "How?" smiled the bank. "You have no money." More sleepless nights as Eduardo planned his third fortune. But this time he vowed to create a business that no one would want to steal. He says, "I read and studied around the clock to become an expert in sewage disposal." To draw attention to his country's growing sewage problem, Eduardo mocked up 1,000 copies of 3 different ecology magazines, each magazine featuring a story on the country's looming waste disposal crisis. He mailed the magazines to everyone in government and in media and followed the mailing with hundreds of telephone calls announcing, "I have a solution." His third fortune would be his largest by far, and he made it just 3 years ago. The story of Eduardo Prado is the great American success story. But in his case, it's Central American. You see, my friend Eduardo Prado lives in Guatemala. For Penny and me, the next 3 days would be jammed with 1,000 happy surprises, but none quite so jolting as the electric moment that would occur between Eduardo and me exactly 1 hour after I met him.